Hi there and welcome back to Elements for Bloggers. I'm Jenny Elliott, and in this video we will learn how to sharpen your photos using the high pass filter to get them ready for your blog. Let's get started. Alright, we're back in the editor, and here we have the last photo that we were working on of the young girl. Remember, we did all of the different touch-ups and edits over here. And the very last step to get photos ready either for printing or for your blog is to sharpen them. Now, what sharpening does is it helps to crisp up any areas of high contrast. You'll notice especially around the darker parts like her eyes, eyebrows, hair. Any of the high contrast areas are what the sharpening is going to affect. And it's really going to make your photos pop on screen. In order to do this, you want to have every single other step, whether it's editing or resizing, you want that finished before you do the sharpening, because the amount of sharpening is going to be affected by how many pixels wide and tall your image is. So before I do anything, I'm going to take a look at the dimensions of this photo by going to Image, Resize, and Image Size. And I see already that this is much too big for my blog. The first thing that pops out is the resolution, 300 pixels per inch. That's print quality. I only need screen quality. So I'm going to lower this down to 72 pixels per inch. And that way the file size is going to be much smaller, but it's still appropriate for web. Now I'm going to uncheck Scale Styles here. And I want to keep Constrain Proportions checked. The reason for that is I want to make sure that when I change the width, it automatically changes the height proportionately for the size of the photo. I don't want to squish the picture by changing the width and not the height. So make sure that Constraint Proportions is still checked. I'm going to change this to, let's say, 680 pixels wide. And that's fine. This has automatically changed the height to 1023, and that's an appropriate size. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And there we go. Now this is 45%. In the lower left-hand corner, remember, you can see what size you're previewing at. I'm going to go ahead and bump this up to 100%. There we go. And now I can see the size it's going to appear on the blog. So now that I have this resized for my blog, I'm ready to do the sharpening. I'm going to go over here to the right-hand side on my Layers palette. I'm going to select all the different layers of the adjustments that I've made and right-click on any of them, and then I'm going to flatten the image. This takes everything that I did in all of the edits and it merges them down to one single layer. And now we're ready to sharpen. I'm going to right-click on this new layer and I'm going to duplicate it. And I will call this sharpening. It's the same exact thing right now, but we're going to be applying sharpening to this top layer that we just created. Now, with this new layer selected, I'm going to go up to Filter, Other Filter, and then High Pass. And this is what we get. The slider at the bottom of this dialog box, it tells you how much sharpening is going to be done. So this is way, way, way too high. What you want to do is only drag this down far enough where you can only see the finest details, because that's where the sharpening is going to be applied to. That might be a little bit too much still. You want to just have it the slightest bit where you can still see some of the details. See, I can still see her hair up here, I can still see her eyebrows and her eyelashes, but you don't want to have too much of a halo effect around those. If I even bump it up to, let's say, here, take a look at the edge of her hand. That has a halo all the way around the edge, and look how well you can see. I'm not sure if you can see this very well, but on my screen, I can see the individual hairs on the back of her hand. That is still way too big, and that's why I'm going to keep bumping it down. And for this photo, it looks like 0.8, 0.7. I'll say 0.7 is going to be about right. And if you're in the middle of these steps and you can't see any changes happening over here, it's because you need to click Preview. You need to make sure that Preview is checked right here in this box. So I have it set where I want. I'm going to click OK. And there we go. The sharpening is finished. Now we're going to change the blend mode of this layer so that we can still see the background through that sharpened layer. So I'm going to go over here to the blend mode on this layer, and I'm going to go down to, let's try overlay and see what it gets us. You may not know that anything has happened, you may not be able to tell, so I'm going to turn on and off the sharpening layer and we'll see what the difference is. Here is with it off and on. Wow, that makes a big difference. Especially note right here at the eyelashes, that's where it's going to be the most prominent. Off and back on again. That looks a lot more crisp. If you notice that there are any tiny little hairs that seem to be glowing or glistening, you'll want to turn down the opacity of that sharpened layer because that's just too much that you've done. So now that that's finished, I will highlight both of these layers and right click, and I'm going to flatten it again. So now this is all part of the same image, and I'm ready to go export this photo now to save it for my blog. I'll go to File, Save for Web, and remember I had already resized it to the size that I wanted. This will be a high quality JPEG. Is fine. Clicking OK, and now I'm going to say, girl, ready for blog on my desktop. Now I did want to mention that if you think you're going to be using this photo for something besides your blog, let's say you wanted to have a picture to print later, then I would make sure that you go back. I'm going to go back on my history panel here, and I'm going to step all the way back above where I flatten the image, above where I change the image size, and here we go. This is the original file that I just opened. If you want to save a version of this image for later, then you would go to File, Save As, and you want to save this in Photoshop format. It will give you a PSD file name, and that way, if you ever want to have access to this photo again with all of these layers available, then that's what it would give you. The PSD would preserve all of these layers as long as when you save it, all the layers are still available. So in today's lesson, we learned how to use the high pass filter to sharpen our photos. Please don't forget, you have to have every other step done before sharpening, including cropping and including resizing the photo. And because this video went pretty quickly, I'm going to go ahead and write out the individual steps below the video, and that way you'll be able to walk yourself through these steps without necessarily having to watch the whole video over again. Today's assignment is to edit a photo from start to finish, then merge all the layers, resize it for the web, and then finally sharpen it using the high pass filter. You have a number of tools at your disposal now for how you can edit your photos, and if you would like me to come check out what you've accomplished, then I would love to do that. Please leave a link to it in the comments below. If you've included some of your edited photos in a blog post, then leave me a link to your blog post. If you have your photo just up on Flickr, then invite me over there. I would love to take a look at what you've done. I'm especially excited about all that I hear on my Facebook page about how people are using this and how it's really improving their blogs. So bring me along for the ride. I'd love to see what you've done. And next time on Elements for Bloggers, we will be finally adding text to your photos. I'm going to show you a number of different ways that you can add text that will add some interest and hopefully help step up your game for Pinterest a little bit. So I'm Jenny Elliott, and if you're enjoying this series, I hope you'll give a shout out in the comments or on my Facebook page. And please don't forget to share this series with your friends or anyone else that you think might find it useful. Thanks so much for joining me. See you next time.